Over the last year, we've seen a lot of devaluations with other setups. One that's staying pretty strong, especially for people that don't want too many cards, is what I would call the Capital One Dynamic Duel. This is a 2-card setup that punches above its weight class. We'll talk about the strengths, weaknesses, and who I think this is good for. Big favor is to hit the like button to help with the algorithm, and if you know anyone else that might benefit, then share this with them. Starting with the basics, which cards are we even talking about? The first one is your workhorse and the one that's doing a lot of heavy lifting on the earning side. There's pretty much two choices here. You have the Saver 1 or the Saver. Both are very similar with minor differences. For the Saver 1, you're getting 3% back for dining, entertainment, popular streaming, and also grocery stores. It also has no annual fee. For the Saver, you're getting 4% back on dining, entertainment, and popular streaming, and 3% back for grocery stores. To account for this increase, there is a $95 annual fee. There are some other partnership ones like 10% back on Uber or Eats, which are persistent on both cards. Same thing for 5% back on hotels and car rentals through Capital One Travel. And also what might be the most underrated, 8% back on Capital One Entertainment, which is the same for both the Saver 1 and the Saver. Okay, so you have two cards. Which one should you get? You can pretty much solve for this using a break-even analysis. Put one card on either side, swap in their formulas, and simplify it down and solve for X. In our case, X is $9,500. This means that if you spend exactly $9,500 together on dining, entertainment, and popular streaming, then you are impartial. In that case, both do the same thing. If you do spend more than $9,500, then the Saver wins. If you spend less, then you're better off with the Saver 1. Also note that if you are doing expert mode, then the break-even number is going to be lower just because of the value of the points. We'll get into expert mode towards the end of the video. Okay, so part 1 of the setup is Saver or Saver 1. Part 2 is the Venture X. Unlike the Saver side, there's not really a strong argument for the Venture compared to the Venture X. Venture X wins pretty handily. They both earn 2x miles back on everything, but that's the main key thing they share. It's like comparing LeBron with Redick. You can, but I really wouldn't. Okay, so what does the Venture X bring to the table? You get strong multipliers, lounge access, and it's pretty heavily subsidized. You get 10x miles back on hotels and car rentals through Capital One Travel, 5x miles on flights through Capital One Travel, and 2x miles on everything else. There are other cards that cover travel broadly, but this isn't bad. You also do get access to Capital One lounges. These are pretty nice and have great cocktails and food options, and they're also a fun vibe. At the same time, there is a big weakness. As of filming, you can only find them in Dallas-Fort Worth, Denver, and Washington Dulles. And to be fair, DFW and Denver are number 2 and 3 in terms of busiest US airports, so not necessarily bad, but there still is room for improvement for everyone else. They also do have a partnership with Plaza Premium, and Plaza is one of the largest groups with over 250 locations in over 80 airports in 30 countries. To be fair, this is more useful if you travel internationally. As of right now, there's only 2 options in the US, Dallas once again, and also Orlando. The other lounge partner is Priority Pass. Given the changes that are coming up with other flagship cards, I would say that the one from the Capital One Venture X is towards the top of the list. A big reason for this is guesting, so for a lot of other cards, it's U plus 2. Capital One's version is a bit broken, but in a great way. For Capital One lounges, it's U plus 2, same with Plaza, but for Priority Pass, it technically doesn't have a limit. The Capital One team has also confirmed that it's U plus unlimited number of guests. If you look on Reddit or Flyer Talk, there are a bunch of data points, so here is someone bringing in 10 people. Someone else did 8 people without any issues, and generally speaking, the lounge doesn't really care because they're punching it into the system, they're charging Priority Pass, who's then charging Capital One. From the lounge's end, the more the merrier. If you are trying to bring in 100 people, that probably doesn't work, but otherwise it just depends on how busy the lounge is, what the capacity is, and what they probably think is reasonable. From the sound of it, 6 to maybe 10 is fine. Even better is the superpower of the card, and the fact that you can add up to 4 authorized users to the Venture X for no additional fee. Each of those 4 people get their own Venture X card and also get their own Priority Pass cards. So that's 4 other people with unlimited Priority Pass cards that can bring in unlimited number of people. This is amazing if you're a credit card person, but maybe your parents are not, or maybe you have siblings that are not, but you want to hook them up. Also great if you have a player 2 and you don't want that many annual fees. For your parents or siblings, if you are a bit concerned, you can keep the card yourself and then just give them the Priority Pass card. There is a $395 annual fee, but it is on the low end for flagship cards. It's also net cheaper for most people by a pretty huge margin. The reason for this is because you get a $300 travel credit through Capital One Travel, so if you do 1 trip a year, then that helps a lot. You also get 10,000 bonus miles, which are worth at least 100 towards travel, and this is every card member year. It's every anniversary year, so there is a bit of incentive to keep it. Long term, you're probably breaking even from the credit as well as the anniversary bonus. That means that lounge access for you and potentially your family is the cherry on top of the sundae. On that note, if you do want to learn about these cards or pretty much any other cards out there and you want to support the channel, we do have links on the website, AskSebby.com, and also down below in the description box. As always, make sure the links are competitive, that the cards make sense for you, but otherwise it is a huge way to support the channel, so thank you guys in advance. We also do have calculators for cards of the Venture X, so I would recommend running the numbers. End of the day, the card needs to make sense for you given your spending and your circumstances. I'll link it down below, but it should pop up if you Google Venture X AskSebby. Okay, so what are the pros of the setup compared to some other ones? A big one for me, and probably a lot of you, is that it covers a lot of ground. With other setups, you might need 3 or 4 cards to do the same thing. The only weak spots are gas stations or EV charging, and also public transit. And to be fair, most other setups don't really do a good job of gas stations or EV charging anyways. For transit, it depends on how much you're spending and whether that's worth focusing on as a multiplier. If you are trying to fill in that category, there is one other card that really helps. So the City Custom Cash offers 5% back on your top eligible spend category on up to 500 spend per billing cycle. This includes options like gas stations and also select transit. Get that card and use it purely for gas or transit and you're good to go. Outside of that though, and especially if you are doing expert mode, this feels like an S tier setup. Another big benefit that we did cover in the first section is cost. Most of the other setups are going to cost you more for that one flagship card compared to the flagship here and also even the saver. Effective annual fees are another consideration, and unless you can use up the entire coupon book or some other cards, this is probably your best bet. Using a basketball analogy, it kind of feels like Jokic, so if you know the space, you can appreciate how overpowered it is, but if you don't, then there are flashier names like Curry or LeBron. For example, I've had non-credit card friends ask me about new travel cards and which ones they should get. My suggestion is almost always the Venture X, given the current value and the fact that it makes sense for so many people. For them, they are a bit skeptical because they see flashier other cards, or they think about cards like United. As weird as it sounds, it's still very much an if you know type of card, especially for non-enthusiasts. That's not to say that there's not any weaknesses. If you are a very frequent traveler, you might still want to get this card because it doesn't really hurt you, but there are other cards that might move the needle a bit more. Unless you're out of Dallas, DC, or Denver, you probably have better lounge options with other cards. Another factor is transfer partners and what I consider expert mode. Keeping it simple, I would argue that Capital One has less strong partners. They're not bad by any means, but other issuers cover more ground. If you are looking to do a deep dive, your best bets are going to be Aeroplan, Emirates, Flying Blue, Qantas, Singapore, Turkish, and Virgin Red. Again, there is value here, but I would say that it's a tiny little notch below. Speaking of expert mode, this is one of the reasons why it works as a dual. The cashback that you earn can be turned into miles, and you can get more value from it. That means that 3% back on your Saver 1 ends up being 3x miles. With a lot of the transfer partners we talk about, you can generally get about 2 cents per mile. It is more targeted towards premium tickets like first class or business, but there is value and that's kind of how you get it. In that case, 100,000 miles is about 2,000 in value and 3x miles about 6% in value. Let's do a super fast example with one of the best first classes, Singapore. This is their flagship product and on most travelers' bucket list to do at least once. Let's say you want to fly to or from Zone 1, which is Singapore, to let's say Zone 13, which is the US East Coast. For business, you're looking at about 112K, and first, about 150K. Doing it as a round trip, you're looking at about 297,000 miles. And a reminder that this is not booking it on Capital One Travel, this is taking your Capital One miles and then transferring it over to Singapore KrisFlyer. Depending on dates, you're looking at about $20,000. The cheapest all-in that I could price out was about $17,000. 17,247 divided by 297,000 miles is 5.8 cents per mile. The main idea being that you can get a ton of value, but I think 2 cents per mile is a pretty fair peg. Also, this is a bit of a crazy rabbit hole. You don't really need to do expert mode if you don't want to, but otherwise, 3% is still pretty solid. Okay, so what's the main takeaway for the Capital One Dual? It's a pretty strong setup that works really well together. You cover a lot of ground in terms of multipliers, and the weaknesses can be filled with other cards like the City Custom Cash. I also like that it's pretty reasonable for people that are new to the space. You have a pretty affordable top-line annual fee, and especially effective annual fee. And straight up, you get great value. If your player 2 is on the fence, it's nice to be able to add them, or their parents, or siblings, or your siblings or parents, as authorized users for lounge access. To me, and probably for a lot of you, this is what makes the setup S tier, especially for larger families. Also, as of mid-2024, I would argue that the Venture X has the best iteration or version of the Priority Pass card among flagship options. Even if you do graduate to other cards for better lounge access, the benefit here is that it's still a break-even, meaning that it's a great foundation and something you can keep long-term. It might not have the flash of other setups, but this definitely feels like a unicorn and one of the best options for most people in 2024. Again, if you want to learn about cards, we have links on the website, AskSebby.com, and also down below in the description box. If you made it to this point, leave a unicorn emoji in the comments down below, and I'll try to heart it and also respond. 2 questions: would you rather go for the Saver or Saver 1? And also, what other features would you want them to add to the Venture X? Let me know and everyone else know, and hopefully Capital One know, in the comments down below. Big favorite, thumbs up, consider subscribing, but otherwise hope you liked it. See you next time.